Good evening, everyone. We are on our webinar for small herds, how to obtain effective results from Breedplan. My name's McDonald. I'm going to chair the session. I'm the old guy in the hat, and the young guy, Christian Duff, is actually going to do the presentations. Now, just so you all know, you actually do not have voice contact, so if you do want to ask questions, you have to type your questions into the questions field and then also make sure you send them. Now, if you happen to lose your questions box, which you may well do if you're like me, there is a couple of arrows there that will click it back. I think it's a red arrow that you'll bring back your questions in. So welcome everyone. We're actually going to start off, we're going to do a couple of polls tonight, and I'm going to, the first poll will be, we're just interested to know what your herd size is, and so I'm now going to hand over to Christian, and he'll conduct the early poll, and then we'll get underway with the webinar. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you, Alex. We're just going to start off with this first poll. I'm going to launch it now, so it'll come up on your screen. The poll will be open, so if you can spend the next couple of seconds just answering that poll, it's all anonymous, but if you can fill that in, I can have a good idea how many people have voted, get a percentage in front of me. If you can spend a little time answering that, and that just helps us monitor who we're talking to. So we've had about 60% voted now, going up to about 70%. Okay, we've got about 80% voted. There's still a few people, might be checking their emails or something. That's 90% voted. Thank you very much. So we might close it off there and start the presentation for the evening. We've got another couple of polls coming up tonight, so we'll get those underway when necessary. First of all, just to introduce myself a bit further, my name is Christian Duff. I'm a Technical Officer for Southern Beef Technology Services based out of Armidale. I'll be taking you through this webinar tonight with assistance of Alex, who will be chairing and answering your questions. We should say that we encourage your questions at all times, so feel free to submit them in the questions field, as Alex pointed out. We'll also be pulling up periodically to answer those questions about 3 times throughout this presentation at the end, so we encourage your interaction. The webinar tonight, we will be going through the session topic of how to obtain effective results from Breedplan for small herds, and that'll be broken up into 3 areas, being basically outlining how the Breedplan analysis works to form contemporary groups. It's pretty important that everyone understands that, not just small herds, of course. So we'll be going through that in some amount of detail. We'll then define what we mean by effective records and results. It's one thing to say it, but I guess we've got to understand what that actually means and means to a breeding enterprise. And then at the end, the most important session, I think, will be to discuss the management options that small herds can implement to maximise the effectiveness of the performance record being collected in their herd. A lot of these topics are very pertinent to herd sizes of 50 and below, 50 calves per calving year, but there are some very important issues in here that can be applied by all herds. So just to start off with the first section of the of this presentation, we have to go back to really understand why we have the genetic evaluation, and we have to come back and understand this thing in front of us now. We've got a good-looking Santa Gertrudis bull there, and he's got a thing on top of him saying P equals G plus C. Now, what does that stand for? We have to all understand that because it's really the crux of why we have a genetic evaluation. And I'll just put up 3 points in front of you there, what that equation stands for. It's basically the performance or the phenotype of an animal. Got that animal standing in front of us there, that Santa bull, equals the combination of his genetics and the environment from which he's been run. Why we need a genetic evaluation is because as C-stock producers, you're very good at collecting phenotypes. You weigh animals, you scan animals, you collect pedigrees, etc., etc. And what we do is what we need is genetic evaluation where we can do a number of things so we can really isolate what the genetic component is of the animal, the G part of the equation, by adjusting or getting rid of or removing for the E factor. And that really helps us identify what the genetic component of the animal is, because that's a really important part that we're going to be using as C-stock producers either in our own herds or selling to clients to use in their herds. So it's where the genetic component is really where we get our EBVs from, our estimated breeding values, through our genetic evaluation. So how does Breedplan actually predict the genetic package, and what does it do? Well, another way of looking at it is how does it actually remove all that environmental component. It's probably the most common question we get asked in Breedplan, and I can understand why, and we really need to understand that. The first thing is it uses these things called contemporary groups, and that's where we're really going to be focusing on tonight, because it really does feed into how do you get effective records as a small herd. It does feed into being able to and needing to understand what contemporary groups are. The second thing is genetic linkage, but as I said, we're going to be focusing on contemporary groups tonight. So let's just move on and talk more about contemporary groups. Contemporary groups are where we're treating like with like. We're really comparing animals that should be compared together. They've had the same equal opportunity to perform for their performance. And that's where there's a number of factors that are built into the Breedplan analysis to form the contemporary groups, and that's what I'm going to be taking you through now. The first range of things are what we call automatic criteria. So things like herd. The Breedplan analysis will only compare, in this case I'll just use a trait such as weaning weight. The Breedplan analysis will only compare animals for weaning weight if they're weighed in the same herd. It doesn't compare a herd that's, say, on the Northern Tablelands in New South Wales where I'm based to a herd that's in Victoria or a herd that's in Queensland. It only compares weaning weights of animals that are born in the same herd. The second thing is calving year. So within that herd, it only compares animals that are born within the same calving year. It doesn't compare the weights of animals from 2005, 2010. The reason being is there's seasonal differences across years. So it has to take into account calving year. It does that because we know the age of an animal because feedstock producers such as yourselves submit birth dates. Another thing we can look at here is ETs versus naturals. So naturals and AI calves are compared together. ET calves are off into their own contemporary group because they're from a different sort of management regime which affects performance. The next point there is twins versus singles. So if you happen to have twin calves, I know I've got a few sets at my place this year, so no doubt you do, because of the good season last year, no doubt, then the twin calves won't be compared to single calves necessarily, or definitely won't be in the analysis. So you mark that down when you submit your calf records to the Breed Association. We know which ones are twins and singles, and we take that into account accordingly in the Breedplan analysis by forming different contemporary groups. The next one there is sex, which is males versus females. So the Breedplan analysis will only compare males with males and females with females. And the last dot point there, I've got DM age. So for traits such as birth weights, the Breedplan analysis will only compare the birth weights together out of first calf heifers, out of maiden heifers, and it will only compare then out of mature cows. So it'll split those pieces of performance into different contemporary groups depending on the DM age. I'll put those down as automatic because they're things that you record but you can't really influence. You can't really influence which herd they're born in. They're born in your herd. You can't really influence the calving year. It just happens to be the calving year they're born in. So these are all things that Breedplan analysis has to use, but as a C-stock producer you can't influence to get larger or change your contemporary group size. Let's just move on to the next group of criteria that you can have more influence on, and that would be the breeder-influenced automatic criteria. So we've got things such as weigh date. So Breedplan analysis will only compare animals that are weighed on the same day or for any performance recorded at the same time or on the same date. So say for 200-day weight, say you get a group of weaners in today and you get another group of weaners in a week's time, you put their weigh date down. Now the Breedplan analysis won't compare those animals head-on-head for weaning weight because they've got different weigh dates. It's assuming they've got different management history, they've come from different paddocks and so on and so forth. I've also got in brackets beside that history. So say you've got that situation where you've got a group of weaners weighed on 2 separate occasions. You then, after weaning, bring them together and run them through as yearlings, say a group of yearling bulls, and you weigh them on the same day for their 400-day weight when they're around that 400 days of age. Then the Breedplan analysis will actually look back and know that they were weighed at separate occasions for 200-day weight, so it will automatically split them up for their 400-day weight based on that theory as well. So weigh history has an effect, and that's something that probably a lot of people don't have a good understanding of, but it will have an effect of what animals are compared head-on-head in a contemporary group. The next point I've got there is calf age slice, or calf age and slicing. I've got a next slide, I'll talk more about that, so just hold your thoughts on that one. And the third one I've got in that list there is sex, bull versus steer. So obviously if you're castrating some animals younger in life and leaving someone's bulls, when we go and weigh them later in life as all males, then the bulls aren't going to be compared to the steers. They're going to be split up into contemporary groups as long as they're recorded that way with your breed society and Breedplan. You can influence all those things though. You can influence when animals are weighed, their weigh history, the calf age and slicing by your calving joining patterns, and also the sex, so when your animals are steered versus when they're compared to the ones that aren't steered. The next list here is ones you should have a good understanding of. That is the breeder supplied or the breeder defined management groups. So it's where you go to a step further, and that's where you notify Breedplan when animals are being treated in different circumstances. So for example, you might have a group of bulls that have been run together at some stage of their life. You then break some up into a different feeding pattern. You might be preparing some for a different sale or a show or something, and that's where you need to let the Breedplan know and the analysis know, for the benefit of your analysis, that the animals should not be compared head-on-head because they've had different feeding regimes. Another one could be looked at the other side of things. You might have some sick animals, so you might have a sick calf that's come through. You need to let the Breedplan analysis know that that animal's been sick and therefore should not be compared head-on-head with animals due to his illness and probably lack of performance in some traits. So that is the range of things of how our contemporary groups are formed, ranging from our automatic to our breeder influence to our breeder supplied. We must note also that there's different criteria for some traits. Not all the same traits use the same criteria. If we looked at, say, birth weight compared to 200-day weight compared to mature cow weights, then they do have slightly different criteria that forms contemporary groups. I'm not going to go through all those now. If you're interested, then feel free to jump on our website, the Breedplan website, and find out more information, or contact your technical officer, which we'll talk more about at the end of this presentation. Just to talk more about age slicing, which is the point that I briefly went over there, this next slide really identifies what age slicing is. Now, within the Breedplan analysis, age slicing is applied, and it's applied on two levels. For 200-day weight and birth weight, etc., we use a 45-day age slice. So what that means is, just using this graph as an interpretation, say in the 2010 calving year, your first calf, just for ease of calculation, was born on the 1st of January. What it does then is go for 45 days in age and finds the animals that from the oldest calf goes for 45 days and lumps all those animals in that age slice in the one contemporary group, all those other things being equal. It'll then go through and find the next oldest animal and then go for another 45 days and put those into the contemporary group. If we go out to our later traits, such as 400-day weight, 600-day weight, and scans, then it goes out to a 60-day slice. Okay. One exception one comment I should make there, this applies to most of our breed analyses apart from Brahman. Brahman actually has a 60-day slice for both early traits and late traits, so it doesn't go from 45 to 60 for all traits at 60-day slice. Now, I guess you need to ask, why do we have a 45 or 60-day slice? The reason is to remove a lot of the environmental variation we see within season. So I said before that the Breedplan analysis is using calving year to split animals into contemporary groups. It also uses age slicing to do so, and therefore it gets rid of that seasonal variation we see within a calving year. I think it's pretty important we understand that. That's probably helping you understand what you can do, or start thinking about what you can do as a small herd to help maximise your contemporary group size, and we're going to be discussing this throughout the presentation. Let's just look at this in pictorial form, because this always helps me. We can start with a group of weaners weighed on the same day up the top. That's not where animals are compared head-on-head. The next line we can have coming up here is one of the automatic criteria, which is our sex. So we've got our females compared into a group, our entire males or our bulls are compared into a group, and our steers are split up into a group. So we've got some contemporary groups already forming there. Just going down the male stream, we'll say this herd has actually put in 4 different management groups. So they've said, okay, within our male calves, we've got a show team, we've got a couple in there, we've got paddock A and paddock B. Paddock A was actually an improved pasture paddock, paddock B was my natural pasture paddock, and I've split the bulls up accordingly across those. And I've had a couple of 6 calves as well, so I've let the analysis know that. And then we've got another line, which is basically our age slice. So we've got age slice 1, which is our first, say for weaning weight, 45-day period. Age slice is our next 45-day period from the next eldest calf on. And then depending on how many age slices we get, really depends on how broad our calving is. If we've got a nice tight calving, we'll get less age slices. If we've got a very spread out calving, we'll get more age slices, which is something we need to talk about later on. So importantly, the Breedplan analysis then uses differences between animals within contemporary groups in EBV calculation, and adjusts performance for things like age at measure and age of dam, which we won't go into tonight, but this is just to take into account some of those fixed environmental effects such as animal age and age of the dam, whether it's out of a maiden heifer or a mature cow, for example. But it's where you really need to understand and have a good appreciation for how contemporary groups are formed. So what we've basically been through is this first part of how Breedplan predicts the genetic package, which is through our formation of contemporary groups. Just to briefly talk about genetic linkage, what we're really talking about there is being able to compare those contemporary groups across environments and across whether that can be either in-herd or cross-herd or cross-country by using common genes or probably most commonly known as just progeny from common size, AI size, and those sorts of things. So that's how Breedplan works. To predict the genetic package or remove the environment is to form contemporary groups, going through those range of criteria we talked about, and also using genetic linkage to then compare across those different situations where those contemporary groups are run. Okay, Alex, well, I'm just about ready to pull up for some questions. I see a few have come through, so if you can demute yourself and then we can take some questions.
Okay, thanks Christian. I think I'm demuted.
You are?
We're going to have a few questions. The first one is a question from Rudy. In general, are ET calves heavier than natural-born calves?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Have you got thoughts on that, Alex?
Well, if they're out of Holstein Friesian cross cows, they probably are, but that's the very reason that they're taken out into separate contemporary groups, because you can't compare the birth weight of an animal born out of a recip compared to a natural born, although if all the recips are the same breed, then they can be compared within that group. How do I go, Christian?
Yeah, that's good. I think there's plenty of anecdotal evidence I've heard that you can get heavier calves at ETs and naturals, but I don't have any science to back that up. Maybe there's some literature out there that says that, and we could probably track that down if that's necessary.
Okay, next question from Don. What if an animal misses a weight?
Right, so if an animal misses a weight due to a mismuster, so say for some reason it doesn't come in at 200 days, so it's for its weaning weight and the rest of its contemporary group has, and then at 400 days we get all the animals in and weigh them. What the Breedplan analysis does is it looks back and says that animal doesn't have the same weigh history as the rest of the animals, so it will actually go into its own contemporary group and go into a single animal contemporary, which means that the information is not being used effectively at all. Unfortunately, this is some of the situations I know this will happen. And I guess what we have to say is you've got to record the information as accurately as you got it. So if an animal happens to miss an earlier weight and comes in later on, then you need to record that information the way it comes through. There's probably no other way around it, unfortunately. Do you have any comments on that one, Alex?
No, that's fine. You've done that fine. Now, we might just only take one more question, given that although there is some more there, just so we get through. With the slicing of calves, this is from Samuel, what if there's only a single or small contemporary group?
Yes, that is one of the areas we have to be very careful of. In regards to a small number of animals, so you're saying a small number of calves outside the slicing group. What happens is you can just appreciate if you've got only, say, 10 calves born in a herd for a year and you apply all those other criteria, so half are males, half are females, you can get down to 5. And then if they happen to be all run together up until their performance is taken, and then we apply age slicing, if you've got a nice tight calving, then they potentially could all be in the same contemporary group, which is a good thing. If they've got a spread out calving, so you've got calves born over 6 months of the year or even 12 months of the year, then you can get a number of animals outside that age slicing and forming their own contemporary group. And that comes back to where those calves falling outside the age slice of the majority of calves, so they're in their own contemporary group of a smaller group of animals or even a single animal, then their performance may not be used as effectively. But we've got to be addressing that question more as we go through the presentation.
Yeah, I think, Christian, the bottom line is that worst case scenario, if you get an animal that's left out in a single animal group, it will still get what we call a mid-parent value, the average of its parents. Okay, over to you, Christian, to go into section 2.
Okay, let's move on into the next section. Thanks for the questions. There's a few more coming through and we encourage you to keep submitting those. The next part of this presentation is about effective records. It really does feed into what we've just been through in regards to contemporary groups. What is an effective record and how does that apply to small herds? How does that apply to any herd, I guess you would say? Because you remember the topic of this presentation was how to attain effective results, or how do we get effective records within the breed plan analysis. So that's what I'm going to be taking you through right now. The first point there is the number of animals within a contemporary group, and we know what a contemporary group is now, will determine how effective the performance record will be for an individual animal. So the number of animals within that contemporary group will have an impact on the effectiveness of that performance record for each individual animal within your herd. Generally, and this is very generally speaking, we're going to be going to this in more detail, the more animals in a contemporary group, the more effective the record will be for that individual animal. Okay, so I guess we can think of the extreme for one animal. How effective is that record compared to, say, 10 animals, compared to, say, 100 animals? That's what we're going to be addressing in the next slide particularly. However, the thing you need to understand is there is generally a diminishing return with increasing contemporary group size. So what that means is, and this is a good thing for small herds to understand this, is to get the most out of your records, you don't need to have 1,000 animals in a contemporary group. You don't need to necessarily have 100 animals in a contemporary group. You just need to know what number of animals should be in a contemporary group to get the most effective records possible for your situation. And this is really identified by this next graph, which we'll spend some time to talk about. This next graph shows you for each contemporary group size how effective that particular record is for an individual animal. So you can see here, if I just go from the bottom, which is contemporary group size, and up the x-axis, which is the record effectiveness, basically what we have there is if you've only got one animal in a contemporary group, then the record isn't effective at all. That record is not going to be used to assist in the calculation of that animal's EBV, or assist in his accuracy of his EBV, or the EBV of his sire or dam, etc. So the first thing we need to avoid, and this is where small herds need to spend some time thinking about it, the first thing we need to avoid is getting a number of, or a large percentage of animals in a herd that are in single animal contemporary groups. No herd can avoid having no animals in a single animal contemporary group. Large herds will get them, but particularly small herds need to concentrate on what can I do in my herd to avoid getting single animal contemporary groups that could really impact on the performance I'm collecting and how effective that is in regards to my EBVs, and particularly EBVs accuracy, which I'll talk about in a second. What I will say, and this is pleasing as well, is as soon as we get to 2 effective records, I don't have 2 on that bottom line, we've got 5, but if 2 is just in front of that halfway point to 5, if you go up 2 animals in a contemporary group, basically means the record has 50% effectiveness, which means it is still some use to genetic evaluation. It's not as useful as larger contemporary groups, which we'll go through in a minute, but it's still some use. So even if you can only effectively get 2 animals within a contemporary group within your herd, then it's still going to be some use to the genetic evaluation. More importantly, if we say go up to 5 animals in a contemporary group, then the records are about 80% effective. So as you can see there, we get a huge increase from going from a single animal contemporary group to a 2 animal contemporary group to a 5 animal contemporary group. If we can then go and get 10 animals in a contemporary group, we can then get about 90% accuracy. 90% record effectiveness, I should say. Just avoid the accuracy term at this stage, and we'll talk about that in a second. So we're talking about 90% effectiveness of records. And then you can see when we move further along contemporary group size, we are getting more effective records. However, it really is a diminishing returns. So it's where, for the benefit of the breed plan analysis and the effectiveness of records, you don't need to have hundreds and hundreds of animals in a contemporary group. If you can get between 2 can give you some effectiveness, but if you can get on average between 5 and 10 animals in a contemporary group, knowing how contemporary groups are formed now, then you will be getting very useful information for genetic evaluation. And that slide, I think, is pretty important for us to understand. So what I'll do now is I'll just move on to the next point, and I've got that on the same side, is we need to also think more about the effectiveness based on contemporary group size. We also need to think about, within each contemporary group, we should also have more than one size progeny represented. The reason being is that information you're collecting on your calves also affects the EBV and the accuracy of the EBV of the size and dams you're recording. So if you're obviously quite easy to get more than one dam represented in a contemporary group, in a natural mating situation, AI situation obviously, but if you're a small herd, you might say, I'm only going to use one sire by natural joining this year. So another thing you need to think about, how do you actually get more than one sire represented in your contemporary groups? And that will then allow that information to be not only useful for the calves, but also be useful to the sires of those calves. Let's talk more about that later on, because that's something we'll address in the last section of this presentation. So the thing we need to understand, and moving on from effectiveness of records and what we just learnt from in that graph, is the number of animals within a contemporary group and the associated record of effectiveness will affect EBV accuracy. Most of you here should know what EBV accuracy is. It's that little percentage figure that's available underneath your EBVs when you get them. And what is that telling us? The EBV accuracy is telling us is a measure of how much information is driving the EBV and how close to the estimate, so the EBV, the estimated breeding value, is to the animal's true breeding value. So if we can get higher accuracy EBVs, that definitely helps our selection. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide. But one thing that definitely drives EBV accuracy is the size of contemporary groups, and obviously the record of effectiveness based on that size of contemporary group. So it's something you need to think about in regards to breeding animals and using information to do it. Can you get higher accuracy EBVs based on bigger contemporary groups and more effective records within your herd? Another thing which I'll ponder more in the next slide is higher accuracy EBVs will lead to more genetic progress, because accuracy selection is something that drives genetic progress, and we'll talk about that more in a second. The other thing you need to understand about accuracy and its flow and effect from contemporary group size and effectiveness of records is the accuracy of EBVs also impacts on how EBVs and selection indexes are reported. Basically, there is threshold cutoff, so EBVs will only report if they hit a minimum accuracy threshold, and the accuracy threshold is different for different traits. It's actually different across breeds for some traits, and it's also different depending on if the animal's been recorded for that trait or not recorded for that trait, or if he's got progeny recorded or not recorded. So it depends on a number of factors, so that's why I'm not going to put them up, because it sort of differs a lot across a lot of traits and across a lot of breeds. But one thing you need to understand, particularly for a small herd, is you may ask, why am I not getting an EBV or a selection index reporting? Maybe because your performance information is not being used effectively, because in small contemporary groups, and therefore you're getting lower accuracy EBVs than you would otherwise, and therefore your EBVs aren't reporting. So that can be an impact as well, so a reason to try and get maximise and optimise your contemporary group size for effectiveness of records. This is just the last slide I want to finish off on before we go to questions. And basically this is just, it looks like a nice scientific theoretical equation. I guess it is that, but it's important we understand this in cattle breeding as well. What this is basically telling us is the response to selection, so the big R, so this is genetic progress or genetic change, is driven by these range of factors which you influence the C stock producers. So the first one is I, is the intensity of selection. That basically means out of the population of animals you're selecting from, are you selecting a small number of elite animals, or are you selecting a big number of animals? I suppose a simple way of looking at it is we can apply more selection intensity in our bulls because we're only selecting a small number compared to our females, because we're generally selecting a larger number, not taking into account ET programs, of course, which does allow us to put more selection intensity in the female line. The second thing is, and this is what we're really concentrating on at the moment, is R, which is our accuracy selection. The more accurate selection we can get, the more genetic change or response selection we can achieve. So one of the things, again, relating to this presentation, larger contemporary groups, more effective use of records, more accuracy selection, driving genetic change through there. The third point there, which I'll just finish off on, is basically genetic variation. So some traits have more genetic variation than other traits. For those traits that have large amounts of genetic variation, then we can make more genetic change in. The last thing there being generation length. So how quickly can we turn over generations? Are we calving down our heifers at 3-year-old or at 2-year-old? Are we using young size or are we using old size? So it's looking at another factor that drives genetic progress. But what I really want to point out there is that R, which is our accuracy of selection, that's really where you can have an impact by taking some points home from tonight, which will flow through in the next part of the presentation. Okay, Alex, well that's where I wanted to finish up the second session before we find the third, and I think we might actually pull up and get some questions, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, Christian, now you've given everyone their lecture on genetic theory. Now, I'm not sure I'm getting all these questions in order, but I'm going to fire them at you anyway. And the first one is from Richard, which says, given this webinar is about small herds, how small is too small?
Well, that's a good question, and hopefully that graph I put up for you sort of helped identify that. Too small is obviously one animal. If you've got one animal, then basically that record is not going to be used effectively at all. But saying that, you could still get EBVs based on the mid-parent value, so half the EBV from the sire and half from the dam. But the information you collect on that individual animal is not going to be any use. If you just happen to have two animals that can be in the same contemporary group, remember they have to be males, born in the same year, of the same sex, all those contemporary criteria, then basically you're going to get some effectiveness of record out of it. Then going up from there, if you can get 3, 4 and 5 animals in a contemporary group, then you're really going to start seeing some rapid increase in how effective your records are. So it's one of those questions we get from a lot of producers is, how big do I have to be in Breedplan? There's no black and white answer to it. It really depends on how you measure your herd. If you do have a small herd, so say you only get 5 or 6 calves born a year in your seed stock herd, are you willing to manage your herd slightly differently than you are now to maximise the number of calves in the same contemporary group? So it's one of those things we all need to think about, not if we're just a small herd, but also if we're a large herd. How do we maximise and optimise the size of our contemporary groups? You got any more thoughts on that, Alex?
No, that's fine. And I'm going to take the next question because it's a nice, easy one from Pip. Pip has asked, if a calf is in a group on its own, it will get mid-parent values, so is there any point in submitting the weight? Pip, what I suggest to you is let the model work out whether it can use the weight or not, rather than you trying to anticipate. And the other real advantage of making sure you got a weight in is that if an animal has no performance records, it won't actually even be extracted into the Breedplan analysis. So to make sure that animal is extracted and at least gets mid-parent values, by all means at least put in the weight and just let the analysis sort out whether it can use it and how well it can use it.
Yeah, and there's also that other factor which I briefly mentioned is EBV reportability. The EBV reportability threshold based on EBV accuracy for animals that are actually recorded for the trait, even if they're in a single animal contemporary group, is generally lower than animals that don't have the trait recorded. So there's definitely a benefit in submitting that performance on those individual animals. And as I said, let the Breedplan analysis work out whether it's useful or not.
Okay, from Odette, with the advancement of DNA recording, will this impact on the effectiveness scores on a contemporary group? Right. That's for you, Christian. Too hard for me.
Yeah, that's a good question though. I guess the short answer will be, based on our current genetic evaluation and the way we use phenotypes in contemporary groups to estimate genetic EBVs, or estimated breeding values, then the DNA technology won't have effect on any of that, and I can't see how that will in the future either. What it will potentially have an effect on in the future, and I must say we're not there yet, is that it will potentially allow younger animals to have higher accuracy EBVs, because we know something about them from the DNA test which has been calibrated from a larger population of animals. So it's where we may be able to get higher accuracy EBVs by incorporating some DNA information through the genetic evaluation on younger animals, which does help with selection, as I went through with that equation. But if we can get higher accuracy on younger animals, it doesn't matter if it's by recording more performance earlier or using higher accuracy sires, or maybe using some DNA technology, if it's available and is effective, then that may give us some advantages in the future. But I would argue whether we're there or not now. I don't think we're there. We're not there for the majority of breeds, and not even the breeds that do have DNA tests on the market. So I'd say watch this space, and that was a very good question. Do you have anything to add to that one, Alex?
No, you've done well, Christian. Next question is no doubt from an Angus breeder, Peter Sypek. In effect, what Peter's asking is, are animals in the herd book register and the Angus Performance Register subgrouped separately?
Okay, so just to clarify this for the other breed people out there tonight, which is a lot of, we're just talking about different registers. So as you know, for your breed association, you might have the herd book, which is where animals are fully registered. You then might have a performance register or a commercial register or a calf register in the case of the tropicals. Basically what he's saying is if they're in different registers, does the breed plan analysis subgroup them differently and put them in different contemporary groups? And the basic answer is no. As far as the breed plan analysis is concerned, we don't mind if the animal is herd book or APR'd in the performance register, for example. If they meet all the contemporary group criteria, then they should be compared together in the same contemporary group. The HBR and the APR should make a difference.
Yep. Question from John Mills. Where do I find out how many and which animals are in each contemporary group?
Well, it's something we don't actually publish. If you're someone who is wondering, now, do I have many animals in my herd in effective contemporary groups, then what I'll do is I'll encourage you to get in contact with the technical officer for your breed, and we're going to be putting those up in a slide at the end of this presentation, and we can actually do a summary for your herd. So we can actually summarise, do you have a lot of good, healthy, large contemporary groups, or do you have a lot of single animal contemporary groups? And we can provide that information to you quite easily now. It's something I encourage you to do more research on if you think, or if you're wondering, is your herd in a situation of having a good, effective contemporary group size?
Okay, next one from Jeremy. Can you run two breeds in a contemporary group?
Oh, that's a good one. In our current genetic evaluations, we're basically looking at, very generally, we're looking at EBVs within breed. So we do have some breeds that do have crossbred evaluations, which means that if there are crossbred animals within the analysis, so we could use a Limousin example. Alex, you've got a full crossbred analysis, don't you?
Yep.
Yep, so you might have a pure Limousin compared to a Limousin Angus cross animal, and the analysis will take into account heterosis and hybrid vigour, so it adjusts for that. It's one of the adjustment factors that are built in. Saying that, technically, if two breeds wanted to merge their databases and run a large cross-breed analysis, then that could technically be done as well. However, at this stage, I guess to keep it simple, most analyses are worked on a purebred or crossbred basis. There's not too many that compare EBVs across purebreds, but it really just depends on how the analysis is set up. There's no technical reason why that couldn't be the case. You got any answers to that one, Alex, too?
Yeah, no, you've covered it, Christian. Technically, yes. At the moment, the way the analyses are run, they're run on a breed-by-breed basis. Okay, next question is from James Britt, and it says, when selecting AI size, is it best to select size with highest accuracy EBVs for the traits you want to match with the cow?
That's a good question as well, and it comes back to what you're trying to do with your herd. And what I would say is it's really a measure of risk, the EBV accuracies. So if you're wanting to get a picture of animals' breeding value closest to the true breeding value, then you'd be looking for as high accuracy EBVs as you could. But if you're willing to try some young new genetics, then you might have to look for some lower accuracy EBVs because that's what's available at the time. And I think that's sort of the balancing act for C-stock producers. You'll be looking to use some high accuracy size in your herd, but you'll also be looking to test some probably lower accuracy younger size, because really they're going to be the next generation of high accuracy size that hopefully are better than their fathers. So we need to sort of do both as a C-stock industry, but it comes down to really what the individual C-stock herd wants to do and the level of risk you're willing to take. If you are a herd that's primarily interested in having really high accuracy information in your herd and focusing on that, then you could look to use those high accuracy size and dams, and that would have an impact on it, that's for sure.
Okay, Christian, another question. Is it useful to submit monthly weights?
No, it's not useful to submit monthly weights. Just to clarify that a bit further, In the breed plan analysis, we can basically analyse up to 6 weights per animal in the analysis, and that's post-birth weight and premature cow weight. So we're talking 200, 400 and 600 day weights here. So monthly weights won't really do us much good, but you can submit, say, 2 200 day weights, 2 400 day weights and 2 600 day weights, and the analysis will analyse those. But basically what we say to most people is really just focus on getting 1 200 day weight, 1 400 day weight and 1 600 day weight when the animals are still running large contemporary groups, or as large as possible for your situation, and that's where you're going to still get very effective data. If you're really looking to crib a bit more value and get a bit more accuracy in your EBVs, then you can look to submit those say a second 200 day weight and a second 400 day weight, for example. But what we're saying to most herds is just focus on getting 1 in each weight category, and that'll be more than adequate for our current genetic evaluation and for the accuracy of the EBVs.
Okay, Christian, one more question, because there's lots of good questions coming in, but we've got to get on. This is from Jeff. What is an out-of-line weight? How far below or above the mean is an out-of-line weight, or what we call an outlier?
An outlier weight. Now, outliers, well, it sort of fits nicely into this discussion because we know what contemporary groups now. So when an animal's flagged as an outlier, it's actually picked up as being extremely above or extremely below the average of its contemporary group for whatever trait we're talking about. It could be a weight, a birth weight, a 200-day weight, a scan measurement, for example. And basically the statistical measure it uses, it needs to be more than 3 phenotypic standard deviations outside the average of that contemporary group. So what that basically means, just a scientific term, a scientific measure of that animal is a long way from the average of the group, and therefore we need to flag it and question it. Now, obviously, in most circumstances, we expect that outlier record may not be, probably shouldn't be within that contemporary group, but it's then up to the prerogative of the breeder to check the records, check the age of the animal, whether the animal should be in a different management group, etc., and then advise Breedplan on how that outlier record should be handled. And most of you that have been in Breedplan for some time would have received an outlier report for your herd and had to deal with it. There's a standard response to those sort of things once you've checked your records.
Okay, Christian, thanks. And just for those attending, you'll be interested to know we actually can monitor how many of you are online, and we were pretty worried about tonight because we know we're competing with Farmer Wants a Wife and the Brownlow Medal presentation for you Southerners, but we're still sitting at 96, which is about a peak for the night. So hang in there, guys. We've got one more session to go.
All right, thanks, Alex. This is only a fairly brief session, but keep those questions coming in because we were going to stop for another question sessions after this one. So this is what we're going to talk about now is how to maximise your record effectiveness, or managing your herd to maximise contemporary group size is another way to look at it. And some of the things you can do, and I've just basically got 7 basic points up here that we can think about. How do we implement these things to basically make sure we got our records are effective as possible and through our maximising our contemporary group size. The first one being, and this is the most common way that I know that the majority of small herds can really maximise their contemporary group size. I see it time after time. It's really where you need to look at management practices to tighten your calving period. So I see a lot of herds out there, you know, they've got less than, say, 50 calves a year. They might have 30 or 20, and they're nearly calving throughout the whole year. Now, you might do that for a number of reasons. Maybe you've got show cattle and those sorts of things, you're lining them up with age classes. However, what we should really be aiming for genetic evaluation, in most circumstances, if you can really aim, and it's a really good goal to have, is can you be calving within a 6 to 8 week period? That means you're in that 45 age slice on a 6 week or a 60-day age slice on an 8 week period. We do have a number of herds that are trying to do that, and I think you'll also find that it's probably got some spin-offs too for your management. Only having to wean once and do all those additional management type things, I find in my situation helps out when you've got a tight calving pattern. But it also assists you having good contemporary group size, because you remember those age slices, 45 days and 60 days. So one way you can get around in those things splitting up into our contemporary groups is to tighten our calving. Now, sometimes it's easier said than done to tighten your calving, particularly when you've been through droughts and things, but it's something we should be, a lot of herds can be aiming to do, and you can implement some things to do that, tighten your calving pattern. And as I said, this seems to be one of the major reasons why we have small herds with animals in small contemporary groups or single animal contemporary groups because they've got a spread out calving pattern. The second point I've got there seems fairly straightforward, but I think we need to think about is, for as long as possible throughout an animal's life, run all calves or animals together within the same calf drop and of the same sex together. So run them together as one group. Avoid trying to split them up and keep them running together for management reasons. So if you can keep, for example, all your bull calves running through to when they get scanned and then go into sale at some stage down the track, then that would make sure that we've got all animals going through. So instead of trying to split them up into these two are going to the show and these two are going to a sale and need to be fed differently, then for genetic evaluation purposes, and that's what we're focusing on tonight, if you can keep those animals running through as one contemporary, it can be really useful as well. Another thing to think about there, if you do need to split animals up into different groups for management reason, then think about those automatic criteria. So can you split the males and females up? And you're probably doing that already for obvious management purposes. Or look back at weigh history. If some animals have been treated differently already, say as weaners, then can you, if you've got to split them up as yearlings, can you do that and use that weigh history to implement some splitting as well? So there's some things to think about on that point of view. The third thing is just remember to register all calves with your breed association. Some herds might say, well, for budgetary purposes, I'm only going to register, I've got 30 calves a year, I'm only going to really register and record 10 of those calves. Now, if your breed is on a cow inventory, then you're probably encouraged to record all calves because you're playing for the active cow anyway. But what I would say is if you're thinking that you may not want to register calves for some reason because your breed society is on a different sort of payment scheme for their calf recordings, then look and try and use another register, such as a performance register or a commercial register. That's where you can really get some bang for your buck in recording additional animals and getting your number of animals recorded and therefore getting your contemporary group size up. Another thing is pretty straightforward but needs to be said is make sure you weigh and record animals on the same day. Now, just to pick a trait, 200-day weight, you've actually got a weight range to take 200-day weight. You don't actually have to take away exactly an animal's 200-day weight or exactly on its 400-day weight, for example. For 200-day weight, you've got anywhere between 80 and 300 days of age, so you've got that age range. So when before animals are going to be split up, then make sure you get a weight on all animals when they get a chance of being effectively compared together. And that basically means weigh and record them all on the same day. And of course, remember weigh history as well for future performance. Another thing you can look to do is associate your herd if your C-stock herd is running with another C-stock herd. What we generally see is there might be a large C-stock herd and there might be a smaller C-stock herd running in association with it. It could be your son's herd or daughter's herd, or it just could be another herd that's running side by in the same management system. If that's the case, then in Breedplan we can actually apply this in-coordinate association. And what that does is it allows, even though you're recorded as different C-stock herds and different memberships to your breed society, we know that those animals should be compared together in the genetic evaluation. So it's where we can associate herds. And that means, obviously, you can maybe be part of a bigger contemporary group because you are effectively joining up with another C-stock herd running cattle under the same management system. So if you're thinking about that one, that's something you can apply and you need to talk more to your technical officer about, and something I'd encourage you to do. The sixth point there is remember to also use more than one side to produce each calf drop. So if we're looking not to get just to get the most effective records for the progeny, but also for the size of those progeny, which does flow down into the progeny's accuracy over time, then we must also think about how do we actually get more than one side represented in our calves. The obvious way is you might only want to have one bull around, one bull for natural mating, but implement some AI programs to get some other size represented there. The other thing we need to think about there, though, if you're implementing an artificial breeding program, you do also need your AI calves dropping at the same time or around the same time as your natural calves, because there's no point having your AI calves dropping a month before your natural calves start, because age slicing might then break them up anyway, and we may not get some very effective records or effective sire comparisons there. So you need to think about that as well if you're applying that technique. The seventh point there is for people doing ET programs, you should also record recipient details, recipient dam details with your breed association or with Breedplan, depending on how your breed does it, and talk to your technical officer about the specific way your breed records that information. Because the basic thing is, if you don't record any recipient dam details with your breed association against that embryo calf, that ET calf, then that calf's performance is going to automatically go into single animal contemporary group. So you must record the recipient dam details of your ET calves to get their information used effectively. And another thing to think about is, for the majority of breeds, you also use recipient dams of the same breed, because Breedplan will only compare animals that have a recipient dam of the same breed. For example, you might have, say, 5 ET bull calves this year, but 2 are out of a Friesian, 2 are out of a Brahman, and 1's out of a Hereford. Then that's obviously going to split those up for obvious reasons. Some breeds are now getting around that by having an effect in their analysis, and I think Limousin has that, where they can compare ET calves with different breeds of recip, and it takes that into account, but not all breeds do that. If you're wondering about your breed, talk to your technical officer. So they're the 7 points that I think we can really draw something out of to maximise the record effectiveness of small herds. And I'm sure you can all think about things now about what can I go away and do in my own herd to make sure I get really effective records for genetic evaluation by applying one or more of those particular points. Now, that is basically where the formal part of the presentation finishes up, and we might just now hand back over to Alex to answer some more questions.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Well, I don't know whether it's just because my question box is full up, but I actually don't have any more questions from since the last group. So in the interest of time, we will move on, and not only the interest of time for those that want to dive away and watch something else. Christian wants to do a couple of more quick polls. The first one, we're just going to ask you to rank the usefulness of this webinar tonight, and the second one, when it comes up, will be about whether you think you can change your management program to make your use of Breedplan more effective. So the first one's up there, as you can see. If you can tick a box, that would be great, and Christian will tell you when we've got a good percentage of the 95 who are still on.
So we've had about 85%, 87%, nearly up to 90% now have voted. So we might just close this poll, and we will open up the next poll. Okay, well, thank you for everyone to being so quick and responsive. You obviously want to see who's going to win the Brownlow medal. Okay, second question is up. If you could just tick a box there. And when Christian gives me the word, we'll just conclude the session. Okay, we've had about 85% vote, so we might close the poll off there, and we'll just finish off with another couple of messages, and I'll hand back over to Alex. Okay, thanks, Christian, and thanks to everyone for participating in the questionnaire. Nothing worse than having to fill out a bloody questionnaire at the end of a workshop, but this makes it pretty painless, and you've all participated really well. So just to wind up, this webinar will be made available to download via the SBTS and TBTS websites. So if you want to run through and hear it all again, or if someone you know has missed it, you can pull it down and listen to it. And the written resource tip sheet, in other words, a summary of what we've talked about tonight, will be emailed to you shortly. And if you haven't had your questions answered, and we've done our very best to answer all those that came up, but if you have questions, please contact the technical officer allocated to your breed, and I think coming up we'll just have a list of those people. There you go. If you're up in the north in Bosindicus country, Philip Mann is the person you need to contact. There's a phone number and email address there for Philip. Andrew Byrne looks after Herefords and Murray Greys. Christian, who you've just been hearing
from looks after a whole bunch of breeds, mainly Boss Taurus breeds. Peter Parnell is the Angus person, and I look after Limousin. So with that, thank you very, very much for your participation. I hope you have got something out of it, and I hope you can also make some changes to increase the effectiveness of your performance records in the breed plan analysis. I think the strong message is that you know, the smallest contemporary group that we can handle is 2 animals of the same sex born within 45 days, and so that allows even pretty small herds to be involved in breed plan and have effective records. So thank you to everyone. Christian, did you want to say anything before we go?
No, Alex, I'm happy with that. Thanks for chairing the meeting, and we'll catch everyone around the tracks.
Righto, and we've finished 1 minute inside the hour, so enjoy your night.